today's program, we're going to invite to speak to us today Judge Steadman and her panels, all representative of her drug court in her community. And they've agreed to talk to us today specifically about their drug court, how it operates, and to give you tips and suggestions for how to make use of one in your community, and hopefully, if you don't have one already, that you'll get some advice about how to structure one in your community. As you can see, we have a very robust panel, and so rather than take up more programmatic time going through all of their biographies, I've asked for their indulgence and all of yours. Their bio information is provided on the materials that have been distributed to you, and so I reference you to those materials to get some more information about the background on this topic. And so, as I wrap up my housekeeping, I turn the panel over to your first speaker. I believe Judge Steadman will take the podium first, and I ask that you all join me in a warm welcome of her and her drug court team as our visiting scholars in practice for today's session.
Thank you. I'm Juanita Steadman. I am the presiding judge of the Cobb County Family Dependency Treatment Court. This court started about 6 years ago. Actually, it has evolved, and there are folks out in the audience who are part of that evolution. So the first thing that I would say to any of you who are thinking about doing a family dependency treatment court is gather up your team. If you do not have a team that's completely and totally tied into what you're going to do as a family court, don't do it. And that, I am telling you, is the truth. Because if you don't have the buy-in from the Department of Family and Children's Services, you won't be successful. And we have that buy-in. If you don't have the buy-in from your CASA, you probably won't be successful. If you don't have the buy-in in our jurisdiction, there are 3 other judges. If you don't have the buy-in from those judges, if you don't have treatment, and I think probably the most importantly, but the thing that we as family dependency treatment court judges miss the most, is if you don't have the buy-in from your community. The title of our presentation is Not Your Usual Family Dependency Treatment Court, and it's not. Business is not as usual in Cobb County, and that's because we do it a little bit differently. One of the ways we do it differently is in our court we have convicted felons who have been sentenced to us from the Superior Court. In our court we have folks, I have had a mom who came to me from McDonough, from Henry County Superior Court, that her attorney went and convinced that judge to sentence her to complete my court. I have a mom now who's come from our DUI treatment court. Her sentence is that she completes family court. Last week I was in Superior Court. I had a mom in front of me who's not been successful in Superior Court in that drug court program because it's not providing enough programs for her that involve her children, and she was sentenced into our family court. So that makes it a little bit different in that all of those folks don't have a deprivation case. Should they have a deprivation case? Absolutely, they should have a deprivation case. Were they fortunate enough to have a family member who took their kids? Absolutely, that's the way they didn't have a deprivation case, because when they got arrested, when they got sent to prison, when they came out of prison, they had a family member rather than have to have the Department of Family and Children's Services involved. That makes it different. The other thing that makes it not your usual family dependency treatment court for us, I think, is probably the involvement of our community. And the panel that I have today is going to talk about that involvement. But having that involvement, and this is what I would say to everyone who's thinking about doing a family court, it does not matter if you're in metropolitan Atlanta. It does not matter that we're in Cobb County, Georgia. We use the Baptist church. Every community in Georgia that I know of has a Baptist church. We use the Presbyterian church. Every community in Georgia I know of has a Presbyterian church. We use the Methodist church. You all have a Methodist church. We use Kiwanis. If you don't have Kiwanis in your community, you have Rotary, you have those things. We use me. I mean, where I send out an email that says, I've got 2 moms who need dressers. Everybody has access to that email that says they need dressers. These kids need to not have their clothes in boxes anymore. They need to have that normalcy. If you have a school, we've certainly used PTAs, we've used youth groups, we use the Key Club at Marietta High School. None of those things cost us one bit of money. We use KSU. We are fortunate enough to have a university, but I think if you have a VOTEC school or you have a university, none of those things cost us any money. And all of those things provide what needs to be done to make that family whole. We're going to talk about treatment. We're going to talk about the services, but we have to remember, for them to be successful, they have to feel that they have what they need. And sometimes that's, do they have the gas money to get to the job interview? On my bench, I have gift cards. Those gift cards have come from my team. I get those for Christmas every year. Those gift cards have also come from the community, but when those gift cards, when somebody doesn't have the money to get to their job interview, and if they don't get their job interview, they can't have their housing, and if they don't have their housing, they can't have their children. That's what has to be done. And I'm fortunate enough that I've had all these people who have kind of gathered around me and bought into it with me, and there's a lot of guardians out here that I see in my SAGs that have bought into it with us, who know now to come if somebody's looking for a bed, whether they're in our court or not, that we might have a bed that we have in a storage unit that we talk somebody into letting us have for free down the road from our courthouse. That's why it's not your usual family dependency treatment court, and it's certainly why it's not your usual drug court. There's a lot of money about drug courts right now. There's $10 million, that's for superior drug courts. There's $2.26 million that's in the budget for existing, if we get it, for existing drug courts. We just did a funding, and I sat on that funding committee through the AOC, through the Administrative Office of Courts, and we had funding $350,000 that was for mental health. Well, we were able to write for supplemental grants for our dually diagnosed people. So that's the other thing, is that you're looking out there and you're talking about, and one of the things that I've seen juvenile courts across the state do that's been very frustrating to me is that they want to get the money, but they don't want to follow what a treatment court is and what the 10 key components for a treatment court is, and they don't want to treat it as a true treatment court. So let me introduce you to these folks who make me look good, and I'm sure they will today. Bryn Black, who's first right here. Bryn is the Executive Director of Reconnecting Families. Reconnecting Families is the nonprofit. She's a part-time executive director, like most part-time folks who works probably 1.5 times. But she is the executive director. That's a nonprofit that we formed to support both the juvenile drug court and the family dependency treatment court that we do in our community. Sharinda is right there. Sharinda is our DFACS caseworker. One of the things that we've done that's been amazing that DFACS has agreed to do is we have a specialized caseworker just for drug court and a supervisor who's just for drug court. The supervisor, Brooke, who couldn't be here today, actually looks at all CPS cases. So if they have drug and alcohol involvement, we can make a determination as to whether or not they need those more intensive services that we provide. Stacy Hull is with our CSB, and she does all the treatment, and that's where our mother's making a change. PPW, I never say any of these right, postpartum women, but that's our treatment. One thing that I do, which is different than some drug courts, is I require all of our moms to go to the same treatment. When we were observing drug courts, I saw a lot of drug courts where you had 5, 6 different treatment. None of them were doing it the same. And that was just kind of my bone of contention, was that we would all do the same treatment. My moms do not like that. Absolutely they don't, because they've all found an easier treatment than what these folks are going to require them to do. Diane Stanley is the coordinator for our family dependency treatment court. She's the coordinator position. Mia Graham, I'm actually going to call her by her married name. I think I married her to her husband about, how many years have you been married now?
3, 4.
Yeah, exactly. And I still call her Vagiola. But Mia is actually the person in our courthouse who was the ASAP, our Drug and Alcohol Juvenile Program Coordinator. She talked me into doing a juvenile drug court, and then and I always say this, she's the reason we have this family court. She now is over all the programs in our courthouse, and she's also the reason that we've been able to, as we Southerners say, borrow from Peter to pay Paul. You know, we've been able to move positions and change positions to give us more services in drug court, but it's not because our county has any new positions, because we're no different than anybody else. We are operating at about 65% of the staff that we were operating at 2 years ago in our juvenile court. Alicia Markle, she's also somebody who has a name, I never call her by that. Alicia actually started with our juvenile drug court as a probation officer. She went back and got her master's. She's a therapist. We are operating with a federal grant right now, and one of the things we specifically wrote for that we wanted was a therapist for the children of the addicts that we serve, somebody who specifically would work with those children. So we're going to kind of get started. I think it's probably better. I'm comfortable doing questions as we go, but it might be better with so many of us to wait till the end to do questions, and we'll take questions then. Mia?
Hi. I think one of the things I'd like to start off with is I've had the privilege of being involved directly in the programs at the juvenile court now for about 15 years. I started off 15 years, I guess it's been closer to 17 years now, as the probation officer in the alcohol and drug program that we had at juvenile court 17 years ago. At that point in time, it had just been started. There was a state grant for juvenile courts called ASAP, and about 3 or 4 different counties had ASAP programs. I think there's only a couple left right now. But from that program, we attended a lot of trainings, and the drug court craze started, and I attended many trainings where they were talking about drug courts and how they operated differently than just kids getting charged with possession or just deprivation cases that involve drugs, just going before different judges and not having an actual program for them to go through. So at that time, it was, I guess, right after Judge Steadman got appointed to the bench, we actually started our juvenile drug court at juvenile court, and that was started, I think, around 2002. We saw how well that worked with the juveniles, and all of these accountability courts, they operate a lot in the same manner, but they just have different populations, and those populations demand a little bit different expertise. When we received an implementation grant and attended a federal training for the Family Dependency Treatment Court. We had our entire team put together first. We went on the training, and we actually have a lot of the same team now that we did then, which is something we've been very lucky. With our juvenile drug court, we have the same therapist that went to training in 2002. He's still with us, and we have had very little turnover. Right after the training, we decided to go ahead and start. We actually went to the training in, I think it was May 2005, and we started our first drug court in January 2006. At that point in time, we got a grant, an implementation grant through the AOC, and we hired a part-time coordinator, and that coordinator was having to work many, many hours a week to get this up and running. We had handbooks to write. We had all kinds of things to do. So we actually found a way. We had, our juvenile complaints had gone down a little bit, and we had probation officers. So we had a probation officer resign and decided to go ahead and take that probation officer position and a part-time position that the coordinator was currently in, and we made a full-time coordinator position for the court. So it was just redistribution of staff based on what the numbers were and where the need was, and it was definitely needed for FDTC. And like Judge Steadman was saying, we then got a federal grant, and we knew that these, we have the therapy, we have mothers making a change for when we first get these women and they go into residential, but some of the we've come to find out, some of the biggest problems happen when they get out of residential and they get their kids back and they get a job and real life sets in. And your older kids come home and figure out that they're going to be living with sober mom, and they sometimes like non-sober mom a little bit better than sober mom. So that's where the full-time therapist that's a court employee really comes in handy, because they're out of treatment and she's able to go in those homes and either get the treatment they need or help deal with those problems. The next thing we figured out was these women really need to be held accountable when they're out in the community. When they're in treatment, they might need a little bit of our help, but for the most part, they're okay. But when they get out, that's when boyfriends come into the picture, family members come into the picture. We do have a part-time surveillance officer that helps see these women, but they really needed to have a probation officer type position. So we were actually just able to take a probation officer position from our juvenile drug court and move it into FDTC. And it's just now become permanently full-time. So that's going to be a whole new dynamic that I think is going to be very helpful for these women. So that'll open up the coordinator's time to be able to do a lot more that can be done with the programs and for coordination. The other thing we found is after we did all the employees and we figure we've got our staff done, we found out that when these women get out, they need a lot more than what we can offer at the court. If they can't pay their electricity bill, if they can't get child care for their child, like Judge Steadman was saying, if they can't get gas to get to an interview, they're not going to make it very long out in the real world. It's just going to be a matter of time till they get frustrated and probably start using again. So that's when, in 2007, we decided to start a nonprofit, Reconnecting Families. That nonprofit was formed in order to get into the community, get the word out, and try and fill in those needs and gaps that we had with the women. And we have Bryn Black here, who's going to talk about details of Reconnecting Families.
As they mentioned, my name is Bryn Black. I'm the Executive Director of Reconnecting Families. The mission statement of Reconnecting Families is to enhance and sustain the collaborative between the community, the academic sector, and the government of Cobb County to help children and families live drug-free lives. And that's a really fancy way of summing up what Mia, I think, puts so well, that this is an amazing team and the judge works so hard and everyone works so hard, but when these participants get out into the real world, there's only so much that this kind of treatment and this kind of assistance and the court assistance can do for them if they can't support their families. So how do you do that? In 2007, prior to my being on board, Mia and several people here developed Reconnecting Families, which is an independent 501c3 nonprofit charity. I oversee a volunteer board from the community of education people. We have housewives, we have attorneys, we have businessmen, marketing men and women, several people from the local churches and local organizations. We also have some, computer specialists, all kinds of really, people that really care from the community, and I think that's the most important thing. We always say it's not your resume building nonprofit, but it's really truly for the people that care in this community. We serve only the juvenile and family treatment courts here in Cobb County. The programs and services that we offer at Reconnecting Families, we have divided up, summarized in these 3 programs. The most important and crucial one is the family support program. And that's a term we use that sort of umbrellas this fill in the gaps mentality that we have at Reconnecting Families, which is providing the women with all the tools that they need to be successful living life that we do every single day. So what we do is we have a clothes closet, and we have volunteers that I take in the donations, and then we have volunteers that come and organize a clothes closet that was actually a closet that was donated by someone in on our board that has a closet build-out company, and she turned an office space into a closet. And so when the women come to court after they have seen Judge Steadman, they come upstairs and they're able to shop and get donated clothes for their kids, donated clothes for themselves. We partner with this, with the Atlanta Union Mission, which is a charity here that many of you are probably familiar with. And any of our overflow goes to the Union Mission. We also work in this same program. We provide furniture. We have people that work for moving companies that give us the overflow from their furniture or moving. And so whenever someone gets out of treatment or is doing very, very well and needs something, we can provide it. And we have a pretty extensive program. We actually have at this point almost more than we can handle. So it's a very, very good problem for us to have. We also provide startup treatment baskets. We've engaged the Junior League in Cobb County to help us with this. They have been wonderful and amazing and have collected cleaning supplies and hygiene supplies and food, that type of thing. So when our mothers go into treatment or move out of treatment and they just need that laundry basket full of all the things that we all have in our kitchen and in our bathrooms that seem so natural for us to have, but they may not have. We also provide graduation ceremonies through Reconnecting Families. We have rewards cards, gas cards, Kroger cards, any of the things, Target cards that would help them get that necessary boost when they're doing well. Because of the connections that we've made in the community, we've also been able to provide things for our participants' children, like camp. We had 2 boys that got to go to Y Camp this summer because of a connection we made at a local church. We've provided childcare. We've provided employment. We've helped with utilities and bills. And in a situation where there was a financial need, like utilities and bills, we would have someone in our team would then submit a request to me, and I would then send it to the board for approval. So there's a very distinct approval process. We review each situation, and then when we feel the participant is worthy of that financial gain, then they would then, I would pay the bills directly or whatever the situation might be. And one thing that we're in the process of developing that we have already partially is the GED program that's offered through the court. We help fund some of the GED program or GED classes for our juveniles and also our family dependency treatment court. And one thing we're developing now is a mentoring program, because we may have a drug addicted mother who has a son who's an amazing dancer, and our mothers and fathers, hopefully when we were growing up, knew how to help us be successful in that, but these mothers may not know how to make that a success for their son. So that would be part of our mentoring program as an example. And we're also working on a scholarship program. We gave our first scholarship this year to a mother that has been extremely successful through the Family Dependency Treatment Court and is now attending Chattahoochee Tech. So the important thing is how to make a program like ours successful. Reconnecting Families is really only as good as its reputation and its marketing, because we rely so much on the donations from the community, and we've been successful at that, so much so that sometimes we have to remind ourselves to spend money so that we can stay relevant in the nonprofit world. But one of the ways that we do marketing is, of course, some flyers, and I brought a couple extra that are up here if anybody wants to grab one on the way out. And then obviously we have a website. We're still updating our website. It's kind of an ongoing process, but you can see that we have updated it to include a blog spot and also a donate section where you can go online and donate. And we're on Facebook also, which is, I've always said Facebook is the best and worst thing that's ever happened to us, because to our own personal lives may be the worst thing, but in terms of what Reconnecting Families can do with it, it's been unbelievable. You can just post, hey, I've got a mother, she's got a 3-month-old son, and she needs clothes, and within hours, people have said, oh, I've got 20 comments saying, I'm happy to help, where can I meet you, and where can I donate? We also use it as a place to link our blog so that people can keep up with us, and please do write it down and follow us on Facebook, because we like to update it regularly. Also, as I mentioned, the blog. This is kind of an example of what we might highlight in our blog. This was a family drug court holiday party that we have done one every year. This particular slide is from 2010, but we also had one in 2011. We tell about each story. Whenever we've had a really strong success, we would also put that on the blog. And that is it.
Hello, my name is Diane Stanley. I'm the coordinator of the Family Dependency Treatment Court, and basically I'm your first point of contact when you come into our court. We get our cases, like the judge had mentioned, through deprivation cases, defects, referrals, and basically my job is what I do. Sometimes I will get a phone call from a defects supervisor, or maybe a defects case worker, basically flagging the case and say, hey, we have a case coming to court and we think they'll be appropriate for your program. So I would go down to the courtroom, meet with the family, meet with the attorneys, meet with the caseworker, and basically lay it out in black and white, tell them what the program is about, what benefits of the program, explain the program, and how it will be beneficial to them. On top of the women in our program, we do have men in our program. And the men come into the program if they are in a relationship with the mother who's coming in, or if that father if he wants to have any type of connection, relationship with the children, then we require them to be in our court. And how we do that is that dad would basically have an assessment through our family therapist, Ms. Markle. So after that process and we go to court, the next basically step is starting the treatment process. As I would take them and sit with them and explain to them that our treatment provider is MAC, which is Mothers Making a Change. I would basically set them up for an assessment. They're actually in my office. They're given a date and a time to show up at an MAC. And what that basically means, they're going to sit with the counselor over at Mothers Making a Change and go over their history, their substance abuse history, their legal history. And that's kind of really going to pinpoint them of where in the treatment they will be, whether they're going to be in residential treatment, which they would actually live on property at the treatment service, which is Mothers Making a Change, or they might be in outpatient treatment, which they would attend 5 days a week at outpatient services and Mothers Making a Change. One good thing that I do for Mothers Making a Change, because a lot of her moms go in there and they're a little bit nervous and they don't want to give full detail and disclosure. So whatever information I have, I provide it to Mothers Making a Change, whether it be a recent drug screen that I have from the participant, whether it be a complaint that very in detail describes why they're here, why they came to the court, why they came for a deprivation. And that's very beneficial for treatment because I supply them with all necessary information that's really going to help them to decide where this participant is going to go. They're going to go in residential services or outpatient treatment. Along with our treatment process, we also have a court requirement. That court requirement is that the participant, whether it be a man or a woman, come to court with Judge Steadman. At the beginning, the participant is required to have 2 contacts per month. So the participant comes to the court in front of Judge Steadman, and they'll have 2 face-to-face contacts per month. That's also with the man as well. And how we actually prepare for the court is really very significant. We actually have 2 staffings before we go to the court. We have a staffing during the court week at Mothers Making a Change. So we all kind of sit down between myself and the treatment team, and we talk about the participants. We talk about their compliance in treatment, whether they're working, whether they're doing community service, how their visitation schedule is going. So we kind of have a grasp of what they've been doing kind of from court to court, because there is a period of time where they're not seen by the judge. So then when we go to the court at Family Dependency, we have another staffing that's kind of more in detail because Judge Steadman is present, as well as DFACS, as well as CASA, as well as myself, the therapist. And once again, we all staff it. We all talk about the participants, how well they're doing, maybe areas that need improvement, maybe some family therapy that needs to be involved. So it really is a whole team effort to get everything together and prepare for court. One thing that's beneficial for the participants, only the mothers, is what we call a homeless assessment. This homeless assessment is when the participant is in court, the initial kind of deprivation contact where we can actually have the woman sit with a family therapist and just go over what's called a homeless assessment. This will actually disclose whether this person is homeless, in need of a shelter, then the homeless order would be generated. It's very beneficial because when the woman goes into treatment, they necessarily might not have a place to go afterwards, or they're coming from homeless, they're coming from a shelter, or maybe they're staying with a parent or grandparent, and they really, after treatment, they have nowhere to go. So what this homeless assessment is beneficial, it basically, and there's an order that states, this person is homeless. They came into treatment homeless. And so when they're finished and completed with residential treatment, it will open up doors for housing to get them a place to stay through a federal funded grant through Shelter Plus or maybe through the Marietta Housing Authority, that they actually have that certification and stamp that says, we're homeless and we need a place to stay. One other component that we have is called surveillance, which I know the judge has touched on. We do surveillance for the participants who are not in residential treatment. These participants would actually go to treatment 5 days a week, but they commute, they go back and forth. So at nighttime, they don't have that kind of 24/7 supervision. So we have a surveillance officer that will go out to their house, they'll drug screen them to make sure they're in at their curfew. They'll also check, make sure they're not supposed to have any visitors or the people that have been approved to the court to actually be in their house, to be with them and be with their children. This is a random visit. The surveillance officer can pop up 10 o'clock at night on a weeknight. They might pop up 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning on the weekend night. So it's very beneficial because then we have closer supervision of our parents who are not in treatment. And surveillance is also with the men as well. They will go out and randomly drug screen them and so on and so forth. One component of my job, as Ms. Black had touched on, is reconnecting families. As a lot of our women don't have a lot of stuff when they come out of residential, they might need furniture or they might need some kind of expenses, utility bills to be paid. We have an organization called 10 Women of Hope. 10 Women of Hope helps single mothers in financial crisis. They're an organization that has 10 women from the community who help single moms. So my job basically is maybe a mom needs something, maybe her car broke down and she needs some repairs. So one of my job is to fill out an application process, and I also do a biography. A biography is very beneficial to kind of outside people who says, okay, well, so-and-so needs $350 for car repairs, but who is so-and-so? What is her story? Where does she come from? What are her struggles? What are her successes? So basically, I put it all together in an application, flip an email, send it out, and say, hey, this mom needs help. This is where she is. This is what she's accomplished. This is her success. Can you help? 10 out of 10 times, it's successful. We get the financial aid and support to help our mothers. And I do that with reconnecting families as well. Maybe it's just simple as they can't pay for groceries this week, or they need $25 for a gas card. I'll do the same thing. I'll go to the brand with an application process, a biography, and just say, this is what our mom needs. Can you help out? So it's kind of very beneficial that we've really grown and really developed connections with 10 Women of Hope who can really help and help our moms. So now I'd like to do it to Stacy Hall.
Hello, I'm Stacy Hall. I'm the Director of Residential Services for Mothers Making a Change. And Mothers Making a Change is a program of Cobb Douglas Community Services Board, as Judge Steadman shared with you. And we provide the substance abuse treatment for the women that are in the family dependency treatment courts. Our programs are designed to address substance abuse issues with women who are pregnant or with women who have children under the age of 18. We offer 2 programs, our outpatient programs and the residential services. Women who participate in our outpatient program attend the program Monday through Fridays between the hours of 9 to 2. Our program is extremely structured from the point that they enter treatment that morning to the time they leave at 2 o'clock. It's all focused on treatment. They get a 30-minute break for lunch. The other 4.5 hours are treatment-related focus. Our average length of treatment for outpatient is 9 months. Our residential program is designed to provide treatment to those women who have difficulties maintaining their sobriety in the community or live in environmental situations that place them at risk for relapse. The residential program, just like the outpatient program, is very structured. They also attend treatment Monday through Friday between the hours of 9 to 2. But in addition to those components, they also receive residential skill building groups in the afternoons. One of the beauties of the residential program is that the ladies can bring their children into treatment with them. And there are 3 benefits to that. It gives us an opportunity to observe the mom with the baby to determine if she needs additional supports with behavior management or bonding. It decreases the amount of time that a child will be in foster care. And it also gives us an opportunity to assess the child to determine if the child needs any supports or counseling. Before a lady goes into any of our programs, she will undergo a comprehensive assessment with a licensed professional counselor. We will first identify whether or not she's eligible for admission. We will assess her for any co-occurring disorders, and we will also determine her treatment level placement. So this assessment is very beneficial because if she has co-occurring disorders, we will have to maybe make a recommendation to one of our dual programs and also connect her to psychiatric treatment. Women that come into treatment with us are dealing with some extreme complex cases. We find that the mothers are facing the possibility of having their rights terminated. They have children that are in foster care. They may be victims of domestic violence, and that in itself creates additional problems. So we have a holistic approach to treatment. We realize that it's not enough just to simply address the substance use problem. We have to address the whole person. So we find that as the ladies begin to recover from the substances, other problems are exposed. So it's similar to that of like an onion, how all the layers are interrelated, and you kind of peel one layer back, and we may find under that some domestic violence issues. We peel another layer back, and you have low self-worth. You peel another layer back, and you will have some guilt and shame. And all of these issues have to be addressed. If not, then the lady will relapse. Because they come in with so many different issues, we offer an array of treatment services. We provide individual, group, and family therapy. We provide supportive employment for those ladies who are looking for employment. Parenting classes is a requirement for every lady that's in our treatment program. And we also do GED enrichment classes for those who do not have high school diplomas. Every person who comes into treatment will be assigned a case manager, and that case manager will be responsible for connecting her to resources in the community, as well as helping her complete applications for housing and seeking housing outside of our agency if they don't meet the requirements for shelter plus care. Each lady will also be assigned to a counselor who will help her maneuver her recovery process and also work on her reunification plan. Our program has been able to eliminate 2 barriers that prevent women from participating in treatment on a consistent basis. That's child care and transportation. We provide on-site child care for women in both the outpatient program and the residential program. And our agency also provides transportation to and from the program for those participating in the outpatient program. We have 3 phases of treatment for both outpatient and residential. And regardless of which program you're in, the treatment phases are similar. So the first phase occurs the first 3 months of treatment, which is phase 1, is our early recovery phase. During that phase of treatment, we are trying to educate the lady about addiction. We're talking about the cycle of addiction. We're exploring their substance use. And we start to help them to identify triggers. Phase 2, which is 4 to 6 months of treatment, is our work readiness phase. And during that phase, we start to continue to build on what was learned during phase 1. We start to work on a relapse prevention plan, and we start to have the lady go out to look for employment. And we start aggressively looking for housing for them as well. Phase 3 is which is our aftercare program, and that phase starts once you've actually successfully completed either the inpatient or the outpatient program. Aftercare is a 20 weeks program where they come back 1 night a week just to discuss the issues that they may be having reintegrating back into the community. So Mothers Making a Change is just proud to be a part of this team that is breaking the cycle of addiction and keeping families together.
Speak for me, Shonda. That'll be fine. I know. You're so excited. Hello, all. Again, my name is Alicia Markle. I'm the family therapist that started working with the program. And once it gets to me, the mothers are figuring out that, okay, it was easier to be a mom using meth than it is to deal with the daily issues that we have now without the medication or without the substances. Our overall goal for the treatment plan is to reunify the family. That's if there is a father involved, mother, and child. Oftentimes, there's not a father involved, but however, right now we're doing great. We have about 18 fathers total, I guess, that we have active right now. Many of those have done a great job in stepping up to the plate. As a matter of fact, we just had a recent incident where it's the first time the children have been placed with the father because the mom doesn't have stable housing. So it's just an interesting evolution how we've actually came full circle. The dad is the stepping stone rather than going straight to the mom, and that this was able to work out. As Ms. Holland mentioned, Community Service Board is one of our main treatment providers. Another treatment partner that we use is the extension. If any of the males in the program need residential treatment, we use that program in Cobb County, and they've done a great job working collaboratively with us. The men are required to actually go there and work with a 12-step facilitator while they're meeting with sponsors and meeting the requirements of the men's program through Family Dependency Court. Going back to the other areas of therapy, I kind of jumped ahead to the men's program. But we do individual, I go in-home. The majority of my sessions are in-home for multiple reasons. I found one that 9 times out of 10, the transportation is not available for them to get to me. It makes my job more difficult if I'm waiting on the bus or waiting on this. And so it's just easier, honestly, to go to the home. It also gives us another set of eyes in the house. You know, it's a different time usually than when the probation officer will be going in. And it just allows us as the team to be able to see more of what's happening behind the scenes. With the individual counseling, it includes, and family counseling as well, individual can be with the mom, it can be with the child. I really just base the assessment on whatever's needed at that moment. Sometimes it changes. Sometimes it's the entire family. Sometimes it's one child. Sometimes it's all 3 children. It's just truthfully, we gauge it as what is the crisis at that moment and what is going to be most beneficial for all of them as a family. We're touching areas, something as basic as hygiene. You know, as living in addiction, that hygiene is not your first priority or order of business. Therefore, something as easy as, you know, teaching the children to brush their teeth and, you know, comb their hair, wash their face, things like that. Just the basic, get ready for school. Before they didn't even, they often didn't go to school, excuse me. So to have a structured day of getting up, doing the basic needs, and going to school. That's a new task that they're learning, as well as for the moms. Other areas of self-awareness, just having new coping skills. With the family counseling, it's basically restructuring the whole family roles. Oftentimes, the majority of the time, what we see with the families is that the children have been the parents and the parents the children. So when mom comes home and has parental structure or is adding parental structure and new family roles, here's 14-year-old over here going, well, where were you 6 years ago when I was raising the other 2 children? And those are usually our most difficult and vulnerable ages, is the adolescent age. As young as, and nobody gasps, as young as 9 years old, raising their younger children to, you know, up to the 14, 15 are very difficult. And it's sometimes sad to see, you know, what they were actually capable of doing and how early on they took on these adult responsibilities. But it's difficult for them sometimes to restructure that and actually learn at 10 you can be a kid and what does a 10-year-old do? Because before, a 10-year-old, you know, picked mom up and set her back up, you know, after whatever her drug of choice was. And I mean, that's reality to them. So it's basically learning for them how to be children again, how to understand what a parent is supposed to do, and also gaining that trust and that respect back of the child to the parent. Because unless the child has that, it's very difficult for them to continue moving forward and actually do the role of a child. Group counseling. All of our participants go through Celebrating and Strengthening Families. Each of these are 8 to 16 week programs that we implemented. We actually went to training for these sessions, and it's based on any family member that was in substance abuse. And it touches, just as I was saying in individual and family counseling, it also touches on whole families going to have a family dinner together, and they have breakout sessions that discuss, just as I was saying, the problem solving, decision making, basic life skills. And it helps the families to see that there's other families out there that went through the exact same thing they did, because the one common denominator they all have is addiction. But that has been a great program that we've implemented, and we get a lot of positive feedback from Celebrating and Strengthening Families. One, because they see how their family can come together and what a positive atmosphere can be like. And so the first 30 minutes of the program is actually a family dinner where they sit down, and many of our participants speak about how they don't even remember, if ever, having a family dinner together. And so I think that's a good component to have. And we also have the therapists that Judge Steadman was referring to through KSU. We have a lot of therapists that come from KSU to help facilitate those groups, because it takes about 10 therapists per session for us to be able to run that. And so that's been a huge benefit to us. And then going on to the men's program. Again, that's been mentioned throughout the panel today, and the men's program was developed because we realized, oh, well, with these children, there are dads. They got here somehow, along with the moms, and so we had to figure out a way to implement that, and we were fortunate that our previous coordinator that was mentioned actually found some outlets to get that started, and so we've kind of just been winging it up to now. And it's worked. You know, we've got the collaboration with the extension. They help us tremendously and are very familiar with what the needs are of males, being that it's a primarily male facility, the one we use. They also have a female facility. But it's just their staff that has cared enough to reach out and help us with that and set that up. So we hold 2 groups a week there that the men are required to go to, as well as the 12-step facilitator group that they attend with a dear man at the extension, Mr. Scott, who's well worth mentioning his name because he puts so much time and effort in to our men. And they also attend the 3 AA meetings per week that are required by Family Dependency Court, have face-to-face contact with their sponsors, or they're required to maintain employment, as well, of course, stay sober. So those are our main, they also come to court with the moms as well. They have a little bit more leniency, I guess you would say, just because of their employment situation. We have money, coming in somehow. And so oftentimes they may be excused to come to court if it's with it being in the middle of the day, and Judge Steadman will allow them to come in on another day that's random to check in and just let us know what's going on. But overall, those are our areas of treatment, and included with Ms. Hull's program, and I will now turn it over to Sharonda. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sharonda Robinson, and I'm the DFACS caseworker who is assigned to all of our drug court cases. And it's been very beneficial for me as a caseworker to have collaboration with all these people you see here on the panel. When a child enters into care, I'm actually not their first point of contact, because we have a CPS unit who go out and does the investigations. And they too are knowledgeable about the drug court program. So a lot of times, you know, in court, the CPS investigators are already saying that, hey, this mom needs drug court, and they're giving me the heads up and saying, you know, I have a case that's coming your way, and I already pretty much have the background information on that mom. As well as my supervisor, who also screens cases for drug court when she sees, you know, a mom coming in with those type of issues, substance abuse, alcohol abuse, sometimes, you know, prescription drugs and, you know, things of that nature. So when we go into the case planning for these, not only do they have to do things with their treatment, their substance abuse treatment, but they also, if the children are in care, we have to do case planning, which ends up becoming a court order. And in that case planning, it is very, very important and good that I have so much input from, you know, these ladies here, because we develop it at what we call a family treatment team meeting at our FTM. And Ms. Markle is usually available at those, so we're able to, explain exactly to the mom, what needs to be done, what steps have to be put in order before this child could be placed, back into their care. Each case plan is very, very individualized, depending on that parent and the reasons that, that child came into care. It's also very helpful that Ms. Markle and somebody is there from drug court so that they can explain to them the benefits of the program. Because you'll have a mom that say, oh my God, I have to do all this stuff. I got to do parenting. I got to do this. I got to do that. But the good thing about it is with, the collaboration with MAC, everything is in-house. They even help our moms get to their visits that start off at our defects office and eventually progress on site at treatment with them. Like Stacy said, the children are able to transition with their parents sooner when the parents are in residential, and it's very, very helpful because a lot of times, we have moms we have babies that are 2 or 3 days old when they're taken, straight from the hospital if the baby tested positive or the mom tested positive. So it's a lot of benefits with this collaboration. Even with the therapy, when we go into and we in our staffings, I'm always knowledgeable of what's going on with my parent at every time, at any given moment, because we just have this great communication among us, and I always know what's going on. So I'm better able to make an informed decision as to what's in the best interest of this child and what I can present to the judge to say, hey, this is what I'm recommending, and just making sure that this is what is in the best interest of this child. Talking about concurrent planning, that is something that we use at the department, as if sometimes our parents come in and this is not their first run-in with defects, or they had previous issues with defects, and sometimes that's automatically tracked for maybe termination of parental rights. But with this drug court program and the collaboration that we had one mom who came into the program facing a termination, and because she got into this program, she got her kids back, and they were back with her, and that was just one of the benefits of this program and the collaboration that we have. So the concurrent plan is basically when a child comes into care, we, track it for unification, but at some point, once again, we're dealing with addiction. So if that mom doesn't make it, we're already kind of planning in the event if not, and we have something else back up for this child to have permanency for the child that's in care. Contact with my families, I have a lot of it. At minimum, I'm required to see them once a month, but my clients know me so well, I can go over to the MAC facility and it's like, hey, Miss Sharonda, I was just waiting on you. I'm gonna come see you. So I have a lot of contact with my families, and like I said, I'm always knowledgeable about what's going on with them, their children, even down to the men that are involved in their lives. And it's very, very helpful to me because I have a clear picture and an overall picture of what this parent's struggle is and what I need to do to connect her to whatever things that she needs or whatever we need to bring up in staff. And so it's very helpful for me to have this just big overview of what's going on with that mom at any point in time, and at the end of the day, what's in the best interest of that child. With the services that are provided with MAC, parenting is on site. When they complete their parenting, all they do is give me a copy of their certificate. The individual therapy, a lot of times we find out that moms have burnt bridges and they don't have family who, could have stepped up to help them with their children, because in their addiction, they probably cut off their family, or their family probably cut them off, because it's like, I'm probably, they're probably sick of, the things that they put the family through. And with all the programs that's incorporated with the MAC, I have one mom who her kids came into care because of a fight that she had with her mom. And now that she's been accepted in the program and in MAC, her and her mama have individual counseling, which is, inclusive of the services that she's receiving at MAC. So it's very, very helpful and beneficial, to that mom and her mom, because, just breaking those generational curses and teaching them how to communicate and not resorting to violence and things of that nature. Even knowing the substance abuse assessment, when our parents first come in, they have to have a substance abuse assessment, especially because I deal with, drug court moms, and just knowing their background and what their drug usage is, and knowing how to, better help them once I come in contact with them, make sure they have everything that they need in reference to getting those children back into their custody. diligent search. I find out this is very important to continue to do from day one. I continue to ask about family. So how is it, with your mom, or what about your sister, or, any siblings? Because sometimes, unfortunately, we have, since I've been doing this, I had one mom to go to termination. But unfortunately, we find that, some of the moms may not make it, and they may be facing the termination, which is like, the absolute end result. The thing with the termination is this program has provided so much for these parents, and if they don't make it through the drug court program, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to make it in reference to getting their children back in their care. And like I said, I've only dealt with one, so that's a great plus to show that how much this program helps, and in reunifying these children with their parents and helping and giving them all the tools and necessities that they need to become a better parent for these children. And that's all.
We're just supposed to take a break.
Oh, I think we're going to take a 5 minute.
CASA.
I'm going to just wrap up real quickly and talk a little bit about CASA, and then we're going to take a break and kind of pull some things together. Our CASA, we have a CASA that is assigned to our drug court, and that's Jean Findle, and her mom passed away, so she wasn't able to be here today, so I'll talk about CASA. CASA is, and I know all of you know, but CASA is another example of those eyes in the house, and that is so significant when you're doing a treatment court. Surveillance goes into the house. DFACS goes into the house. Alicia goes into the house, and CASA goes into the house. And they all go at different times, and they can see and watch and know what's going on in that home. And that is a tremendous thing that has to be done. If Alicia goes into a house and all of a sudden that house is completely and totally in disarray. Now, I've had to, in my 11 years on the bench, redefine what's a messy house and what's more than a messy house. But if all of a sudden things aren't looking the same, their antenna goes up, we staff that, we talk about that. Is there something going on with the mom that she's not sharing with us? The very first involvement of CASA is when we get a case. If family members are being looked at to have those children for visits, CASA goes to their house and does an investigation of their house. If family members are being looked at to be a placement for those children, CASA does that as well as DFACS. So you've got two folks who are doing a home evaluation. If the parents come and say, Judge, we found a house, I'm leaving treatment, we found a place to live, and the very first thing I say is, Jean, raise your hand back there, because she usually sits in the back in court. You have to meet with Jean before you can move in that house. CASA has gone and looked at that house and made sure that that house is a safe house for them to live in. Probably another really significant thing that Jean does, along with all of these other people, is CASA is really the liaison between our foster parents and our court. And that's huge, because we very quickly say to these foster parents, these are drug court cases. Drug court cases are going to be longer. Drug court cases, we're going to try to return those kids sooner, but it may be a transitional return. We want you as foster parents to be part of their lives, and that's happening, and that's been another huge component. The mom who was sitting in termination has 4 little kids. That mom, her best friend are the foster parents who had those 4 kids. When we did Breakfast with Santa at the Baptist Church, the foster parents come with her to Breakfast with Santa. When we did a movie at the Strand for them that was part of our Christmas, the community, the Strand's an old theater, and we did The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. I've seen it twice now recently, but when we did that, those foster parents come with her. Those foster parents recently helped her find her second job, and they provide respite for her when she needs, as a single parent who does not have that extended family, when she needs to have that respite. So CASA is that liaison. And Jean does that. And Jean is also the liaison, and Carlene Redmond, who's our CASA director, for the other CASAs, to let them know what we do in family court, to have them come and observe family court, for them to know. And we get referrals from CASA. You know, folks who'll say, we certainly get it from DFACS, we get them from our guardians, but we get those referrals that say, look, you know, I've got this family that I'm dealing with over in Judge Poole's courtroom, or I'm dealing with over in Judge Whitfield's courtroom, which really sounds like a case that would benefit from being in family court. So that's been tremendous. But it is important to continuously have those eyes that are looking at these families. Before we take a break, I thought I would walk you through a mom, and then we'll do some wrap up and we'll take questions. Melanie is a mom that came to us by choice. She actually asked to come to us. A lot of them come kicking and screaming, and there is a question about whether or not, Pat's smiling back there because she's seen them kick and scream in my courtroom. There's a question about whether or not it's a voluntary program or it's an involuntary program. I've had this discussion with my judges. Well, it's voluntary. But if you want your kids back, you need to stay. So that, for some, makes it seem like involuntary. But there are times that we say, and we've recently done this with the mom, because we're sort of 24/7 and we're doing this email, and everybody at this table has been chasing this mom that I really want. She's a real cokehead. I want her. I like the ones who kick and scream. I like that challenge. But, you know, I'm getting emails like, 3 and 4, with everybody copying each other, telling me how, first of all, she comes in and says she'll do the program. Then she gets to treatment and says she won't do the program. Then she gets to Sharinda and tells Sharinda, well, the daddy of these kids, when he gets out of prison, he's going to get them because she doesn't need to do the program. And we go through this to the point that I say, okay, I surrender. They know when they get that email, let it go. We're not going to chase her. We've got too many folks. Right now we have 43 moms, 87 kids, and 18 dads in this program. So we've got business. So sometimes we have to realize that those folks aren't going to be for us. Well, Melanie actually sent me a letter from jail. And she wrote me a letter and said, I've heard about your program. I'm in jail. I'm an addict. My mother has my children through your courthouse. And I really believe I need your program. And Melanie was homeless. Mothers Making a Change went to jail, which they'll do, went to the Cobb County Adult Detention Center, did the assessment at the Adult Detention Center. Once they did that assessment, she was certainly found to be in need of residential, but she had nowhere to live. She camped out places, like in a sleeping bag, and had nowhere to live. Somehow had a car, she slept in her car. And probably the thing that I regret about the Melanie story is that's before we started doing the homeless assessments. The homeless assessments are really new for our court. Treatment had said to me, we have this funding for moms. There's federal funding for housing. If you're homeless, you've been in a shelter, you successfully complete treatment, and this federal funding is until their youngest child graduates from college for them to have a home. But we couldn't get them there because they weren't getting to the shelter first. So we had a meeting with our housing folks who he quickly told us how much he hated doing this housing. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
That's all he said. This is a pain. My office, it's a pain for my office, but the money is there. And my office is going to be mad if you bring more moms, all of this stuff. But, we just kept kind of trudging along at this lunch with Marietta Housing. And we started brainstorming, and I said, well, wait a minute. Does the assessment have to be done at the shelter? And they said, well, no, that's just where they get assessed. And I said, well, what if we did the assessment at our court? Not us, somebody separate. But what if we did that assessment? Because they can certainly lie to somebody at a shelter as quickly as they could to somebody in our court. So we have a therapist who got that assessment. Melanie would have qualified for that homeless. money. And, and it was just before we knew how to do that, But Melanie went to treatment. She did not have her 3 children. Her mother had her 3 children. And her mother was, I think, her worst enemy in this point, because her mother had truly been the mother of those 3 children. And Melanie went through treatment, and she graduated from treatment. Her mother was very hostile, I remember, and this is something that you'll do with drug courts, is we had a situation with her mom. We knew these kids were coming home. Alicia was going to the school with these kids and talking, and that's a component that a therapist does that's so valuable, is to go with these moms and be advocates in their elementary schools and in their IEP meetings, and being there with them when they're dealing with those people who are very frightening to them because they've never been a parent. And they have all of that shame and guilt of having never been a parent, but they're sitting at the table as a parent at an IEP meeting, or with the counselor, or with the principal, or the 6-year-old who gets kicked off the bus. I'm not sure how that happens, but it happens. And Alicia helps them advocate for that. Melanie's mom was very resistant. Melanie's dad is an alcoholic. Melanie drank with her dad. She grew up drinking with her dad. Mom certainly wasn't going to talk about that and was letting the kids ride with dad. We had all of those dynamics that were going on in that family. So we did what I call, I'm an old special ed teacher. That was what I did in my first life before I was a judge. And we staffed it. I said, we're going to do a staffing. Everybody who's involved with these children need to show up in my courtroom. In DFACS, I have my SAGs here. They love it when I do that thing of get everybody here. But they come, and they got there, and Melanie talked to her mother, with all of us there with her, about the fact that she intended for her children to live with her. And at that point, we were looking at like March. Now, Melanie, at Christmas, Melanie was working at a local bakery, Gabriel's, going back to school to Chattahoochee Tech to be an auto mechanic, which we're real excited about because fixing cars is a big deal in a family court because they all drive clunkers. And Melanie was someone who was saying, I'm going to get my children back. And we all thought, I was ready for her to get her children back after Christmas. And Melanie sat in court with all of us present, treatment and DFACS and Alicia and Diane and all of us, and said, no, I need to wait till the school break. I need to wait till May, and talk to her mother in court with all of us there about why her children should come be with her. Well, that Christmas, Melanie was one of the families that we had folks help. I don't know, how many families did we have sponsors for, like 30 or something?
21.
21. And Melanie told me a story when I saw her at that bakery, which we have about 5 moms there, so I try to kind of regularly go in there, and said to me, I need for you to hear this story. She said, my oldest child would not come over on Christmas Eve night, because she said, well, we're not going to have anything there. We've never had anything with Mom. Why should we be there? And she said, my middle child picked up the phone and called the oldest one Christmas morning and said, you need to get over here. We have real Christmas and you are missing out. So Melanie did all of those things, and she graduates. She's at Chattahoochee Tech. And I tell you this story because this is how your community plays in. Leadership Cobb is a leadership program in Cobb County, and for the past 3 years, we've been fortunate enough that they've asked us on Social Services Day to observe our family court as part of that day. It's the biggest marketing tool we do. And Chris Bethel, who's one of our SAGs, is in that class this year, and at the end of doing that, where we have a mom who didn't have money for a car. We're talking about 10 Women of Hope. They don't really know who 10 Women of Hope is. Chris comes up to me and says, Judge, I want to introduce you to this person. He has a friend who's really interested in being involved with the community. He thinks he can help your court. That individual ended up being Pete Richards, who's the general manager of Ed Volz Honda. So Pete Richards gets into an email, and I'm doing sort of that Juanita Steadman thing of, where have you been all my life? why didn't I know that we had somebody who ran a whole big dealership who wanted to help us? You know, this is huge. And I threw out there, we have a mom who needs an internship. For her to graduate in auto mechanics, she has to have this internship. And he said, does she have a criminal record? And I was glad he couldn't see my face, but I thought, I said, yeah, but I can explain it. You know, this is all an email. And I did. You know, I sent him we sent him her criminal record, which we have permission to do through her. We sent it to him, and Pete said, oh, Judge, you know, they're not going to let me hire her. She's got a criminal record. And I said, well, what if I wrote her a letter of recommendation? You know, there's something about that judge's stationery that kind of gets you places. And he said, well, would you do that? And I said, not for every mom, absolutely not. But for this mom, I would write her a letter of recommendation. So Melanie has an internship at Ed Volz Honda, and she makes $10 an hour, and they're working her more than they had intended to work her. And the amazing thing that they did for her was this Pete Richards, who I've yet to meet because we're trying to schedule lunch, and maybe he's afraid of meeting me, but when Pete Richards brought her in the office the day she started work and said, we know why you're here, and this is the president of the company, he knows why you're here, but nobody else needs to know how you got this job. And she called me or emailed me, as she often does, and said, can you imagine, I really truly have a clean slate there. So Melanie has her 3 kids. My next goal, I was telling them on the car down here, is I'm going to load up every community person who's ever touched Melanie, and we're going to a Superior Court judge, and I'm going to try to get her record expunged. If I do that, you know, it will be truly a miracle, because it shouldn't be expunged. I probably wouldn't do it when I sat as a Superior Court judge, but I'm going to load up that courtroom, and we're going to go in there because they cannot hire her if it's not done. She has her kids. Alicia works with her on a regular basis. Reconnecting Families, she got the first scholarship. That was when Governor Deal was at our graduation, and we gave her a scholarship for Chattahoochee Tech. She's been touched by 10 Women of Hope. And the amazing thing, too, which I wanted to tie in before we took a break, the Celebrating and Strengthening Families. Our community has provided those meals, Bible studies, Sunday school class. And I know that Judge Spivey's back there, and people say, well, how do you go out and ask for these things as a judge? I don't. I take a mom with me. And they tell their story, and they tell what they benefited from by all of these services, and then those folks are coming up asking you what they can do. And one of the things with Celebrating and Strengthening Families is those community people who were there feeding them meals then become their friends. And that's another eyes to the family. You know, they go and see them at their job. You know, they know when they need something. They know when they're going to school. They go to a school that has uniforms, and they see them, and they see them there, and they reach out and they help them with the uniform issue. And that's significant, and I'm going to wrap up with this because it's a Melanie story. Melanie came to our court in August, and as all of us can do, and all of you who work with families can do, it's sort of like your own children. You can immediately look at them and know something's up. And they come up to the front of the court, and Melanie immediately looked like something was up. And I said, what's going on? You know, what's up? And she said, oh my God, you're just not going to believe this. She said, and I'll never forget this because I was doing a weekend with my girlfriends. So this was a Thursday. On Friday, I was going to the mountains with my girlfriends. And that's significant because it helped put me into their perspective and their life. She said, I'm so frustrated. I bought the wrong size uniform. I don't have this. I don't have that. And you're not going to believe this because this really makes me a bad mother. She's sobbing. Sarah Clay was in the courtroom. Sarah's crying. Sarah always cries. And she's sobbing, and she said, I'm in my car, and I am just going to drive off and leave my children. I'm thinking, I'm just going to leave them. That's it. I'm going to leave them. How could I possibly do that with all y'all have done for me? How could I possibly do that and be a good mother? And I said, well, but you didn't leave them. And she said, no, because I remembered that their panties were in the dryer and they wouldn't know where to find them to go to school the next day. I tell you that story because when I went to the mountains with my girl, well, first of all, I say to Melanie, there's not a woman on this staff, there's not a mother sitting in this courtroom who hasn't thought about driving off and leaving their children. If they don't tell you that, they're not telling the truth. You know, we've all thought about doing it, and what I realized in that very quick snapshot about the families that we served through these courts was she didn't have that. She didn't have my girlfriends that I was going to spend the weekend with so we could all talk about when we thought about driving off and leaving our children, or the mother that I thought was absolutely the most perfect, wonderful mother in the whole world, who told the story one day about putting her children out on the street on Hampton Place in Marietta, Georgia, because she's so mad at those twins and making them walk around the corner home. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how could she do that? She's the perfect mother. So for these moms, everybody else is the perfect mother. Everybody else knows how to do it. They don't know how to do it. And what all of these folks do every day, 24/7, with much less pay than what they should make, and all of these folks who are out here who do it in our court, the guardians who work for much less than what they would make regularly practicing law, the CASAs who do it for free, all of those people surround them and give them what they need to convince them that they can be a good mother. It's a long process. And our moms stay with us for about 3 years. DFACS doesn't have custody that long. I know that makes them crazy when they think about that, but there's an order in place that says they have to cooperate with Family Dependency Treatment Court to continue to have custody of their children. And we have them for a lifetime. Melanie's been graduated, but she still calls, she still sends emails, we still reach out to her. So let's take about a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back and let y'all ask questions. I'm just going to tell you a few other things, and then we'll take questions. I wrote some things down when everybody was talking, some things I thought you might have some questions about. One I told you is that it's a long program. We do drug screen everybody who's in the house. Now, a lot of people ask me questions about that. You know, I'm stomping all over their constitutional rights. Absolutely I am. You know, because if they want to live in the house, then they don't have a constitutional right to live in the house with those children. They don't. Now, I'm talking about, you know, the boyfriend or the whoever. If they're going to live in that house, when surveillance shows up, they have to be willing to be drug screened. And that, to me, is something that's real significant. And surveillance does show up. So that's another thing. They've got to be randomly screened. Addicts are the smartest people you're ever going to deal with. They can beat a screen. They'll tape urine to their leg. They'll use somebody else's urine. You know, we're all about talking about urine, you know, the color of it, the temperature of it, but you got to do that, and you got to screen them a lot. They know that if they're going to use meth, when it'll be out of their system. Meth is pretty, you can tell. I think it's easier. Alicia and I spoke to the Y last week, and she talked about that. The other thing is two real significant things. You take their drugs away, they'll start using alcohol. So you've got to do the ETGs. They will use alcohol. The other thing is you take their drugs away from women, you'll have eating disorders. You know, that's one of the things they love about the drugs is they're thin. I mean, one of the ways I know they're not using is they're not so thin anymore, you know, because they're not using coke or heroin or meth or whatever. So again, that's when you deal with treatment, we deal with those. That's when Alicia comes in, so we do that. And it's a 24/7 court. You know, we're doing court on the weekends. We're doing the court every day of the week. We may only see those folks every other week, but we're doing court all the time. And your judge, whoever that may be, has got to be willing to do that. It's got to be somebody who has their cell phone on and their emails on, because things just come up. You know, you'll be in the middle of a dinner party and somebody's trying to leave treatment and they can't get a hold of somebody, so they get a hold of me. And all I can do is walk them through the fact of, tell them, and Stacy has certainly called me on these occasions, and Latina and all of them is, you know, once they leave, just make sure you've told them the consequences. We don't get those calls as much anymore because we all know what the consequences are. Questions? Yes.
Questions, actually. The first one is for, is it Sharenda?
Yes.
When you do concurrent planning, I know you talked about putting them with Reconnecting Families, or that is part of the concurrent planning, and then TPR. Do they ever do a concurrent planning with adoption included in that factor?
Well, it's not really Reconnecting Families. They do something else. But when I do the concurrent planning, it's a hierarchy that we look at as far as what would be next in line. So if they're not going to be able to be unified with their birth parents, adoption is like the next hierarchy because it's the most permanent placement for a child. Then it'll be like guardianship and things beyond that nature. So if I'm doing concurrent planning, I'm looking at, like I said, I'm always doing diligence searches, making sure family is available. But if in some instances, if I don't have family, or if I already know that, like my one mom who is in termination, you know, the kids came into care, they were safety resourced with the aunt, and then they were taken out of her care because she had a drug charge. And so they were then placed with defects. So if the family is not available, then adoption is usually like the second option.
Okay. The other question is for Stacy. The people that you have in your program, tell me, I'm sorry, Stacy. Where's Stacy? The people that you have in your program that you have outpatient and inpatient, correct?
Correct.
And the outpatient ones, are we making the assumption that 100% of these moms are unemployed and have children under school age?
No, we're not making the assumption that everyone is unemployed, but in order to participate in Mothers Making a Change, the admission criteria require that you have a child under the age of 18.
Okay, so then if the program outpatient runs, and that means they're probably not as severe if they're outpatient and not inpatient, am I wrong in making that
Well,
assumption?
that means that initially their assessment says that, and that sometimes is the holding ground till we get them in inpatient, actually.
And I think I kind of understand where you're going. If someone is actually employed, they may not participate in Mothers Making a Change. We do have other programs. We have an evening program where they can participate at that level of care.
So they can do that with childcare? That evening program?
Not the evening program, no.
Okay. So
The child care and transportation is specific to Mothers Making a Change.
okay, just under the assumption that common sense wise, if they have a job, the last thing you'd want them to do is lose a job if they have to be in treatment from 9 to 2.
Mm-hmm.
And if their kids are school age, they get out around 3. So that means they would go straight from treatment to pick up their kids if their
That's
kids were
correct.
still with them. And if they did night treatment, they probably would need child care to be able to complete. So it kind of is backwards. I was just trying to figure out, okay, if I have somebody to refer, how does that work if they actually have a job and have kids that are school age, you know?
And, you know, employment is a focus for us. So as the mothers, when they're in treatment with us, we're going to reduce the hours that they will attend treatment. So it reduces to 9 hours as they go into phase 2 to accommodate the work schedule as well. But, you know, unfortunately, we can't be everything to everybody. And, you know, we have treatment specifically for this population. But there are other programs that the ladies may be eligible for outside of Mothers Making a Change.
Yes. Wait a minute, we're going to bring you the mic, or somebody else.
I'm wondering what percentage of the cases you have also involve a pending deprivation action, and what happens to that dep action? Does it get told if the mom goes in?
No. We have pending deprivation actions on the majority of them, and it does not get told. What you will see is the first thing that will happen if they're in residential is they'll get their children legally placed in their custody. They won't have legal custody, they'll have placement. Then, once they've done that, then we place them in, that deprivation action is gone, and we do an order that's not gone, it's never gone, but we do an order. DFACS is out, but they're not really out. Oh, that doesn't make any sense, because Sharinda sort of stays in it, even though it's no longer a DFACS case. But that order says that they will keep custody of their children so long as they're compliant with all requirements of family dependency treatment court, which includes an education, it includes a job, it includes staying clean, it includes complying with any treatment, any counseling for their children. So we sort of step in as the agency. So the DFACS goes forward, and that's one of the reasons, and I know that was one of the problems we had initially with DFACS, is to convince them that they could let us have these women, because DFACS is so concerned about the length of time in care. That does make it a different court too, because if you take a mom in custody, which I do, probably most people who know me would say on a regular basis that they're not compliant, I will use custody. We then have to look. We don't want it to be the second time or the third time that child goes back into care. Sometimes it happens, but we look for an alternate placement that we then supervise, which may be with a family member. It may be with that foster parent. We didn't have to do that with Cindy, but that foster parent may say, I'll take those kids, but they're not foster kids. They're there while the mom's in custody. So no, it does not get told.
And my next is a big picture question. I'm training to be a parent attorney and I also do juvenile advocacy. And I don't know if it's either from Governor Deal's recent committee looking at sort of sentencing reforms in the big prison population we have here in Georgia. Do you think Georgia's ready for more courts of accountability, including juvenile and juvenile mental health?
Absolutely. I serve on that committee with Jason Deal. I serve on the Supreme Court Committee for Drug Courts, and I serve on the funding subcommittee. Absolutely. But one of the things that I've said to Governor Deal's office on a regular basis, and to Jason every time I can kind of whisper it to him, although he assures me he has no influence, but is this. If you're going to put these courts into communities, you've got to make sure, and I know Judge Spivey would agree with this, being in a rural area, that you put the money there to provide the services they need for these courts to be successful. More money is going to go into the CSBs, but then there's money that was taken out. We just had a huge crisis with our CSB when all of a sudden there was federal housing money we were going to lose. And beds that pay, those TANF dollars that pay for those beds and stuff. I absolutely believe Georgia's ready, and we've run the numbers, and I'd be glad to send those numbers to you. We can save money through accountability courts. The money it costs to have a child in care, the money it costs for a child to be born drug addicted, that's huge. And we didn't mention that, but we've had, one thing I can't do always, some of them I can, is have them not have babies anymore. So they still sometimes have children, but they're drug free. And they're not requiring the medical services that can be required. Also, the money that they put back into the community when they work and they pay taxes. And you take the money away that it costs to imprison somebody with their child in care, with a baby that's born drug positive. There's no way for it not to be a win-win I was going to say Judge Deal, but he was a judge. I assure you that I don't think there's a governor who's ever been more committed to it, who understands it. I think that's why he and his wife came to our graduation. And they didn't just come to that graduation. Mrs. Deal was there for an hour before the graduation, meeting the moms, talking to them, talking to where they are and where they've been, because they truly do have seen it in their son. And their son does 2 felony drug courts, and they've seen in those drug courts the difference that it makes in life. We're not successful with everybody. Sarah and Dina and them said they wanted me to be sure that I said that we kick people out. So we're not going to be successful with everybody, but for us to be held accountable, we need to kick people out. Your next question, you said several. That wasn't. Oh. Yes.
Hello. First, I want to say congratulations on a great program.
Thank you.
how did, you spoke on this briefly, how did you get the community to buy into it? That's probably the lowest.
Well, I'll tell you this, when I recently, we have a mom who has graduated. She now is a janitor, although the First Baptist Church that Amber's a member of, she tells me that you're not called a janitor, you're called a facilitator when you work at a church. And her daughter had always wanted to do ballet. Katie talked about it, you know, we knew this, we'd all talked about this is just kind of an example. And so a woman who's married to a lawyer chairs the Georgia Ballet Board. And I read about it in the paper. So I flipped her an email and said, I have this really cute kid. She's always wanted to do, oh, and they talked about, let me back up. I was actually at a chamber meeting, and they were recognizing a company, because we do that as Reconnecting Families. We'll recognize a small business for the county when the chamber recognizes those who's provided services to us. So the company they recognized was paying for scholarships for ballet. So I thought, okay. So I emailed Patty and said, can we get one of those scholarships? She emailed me back and said, well, you know, Judge Steadman, those are for one school, and she doesn't go to that school, so we really don't have any scholarships. And I emailed her back and said, well, let me tell you about this mom, and let me tell you about this little girl. She got a scholarship. The really cool story about that is at the end of the year, when they were moving to Paulding County where it's cheaper to live, but Vicki, again, has graduated. The mom is still part of our program. I actually was then out in the community, and the executive director of Georgia Ballet came up to me and said, look, my teachers really want Katie. We don't care what we have to do. We're going to get her a scholarship because we want her. That's a small thing. So I think that one thing you have to do is you have to be visible. I said to a group, I did Leadership Cobb. I thought I was too old to do Leadership Cobb, quite honestly. But I did it, and I did it for my drug court, you know, and I made no bones about the fact that I wanted to be a part of that because I wanted people to know what we did in our court. And Justin Odell, who's a young lawyer who has been the chair of our board, I said to a group at a lunch, I need somebody to feed my moms. I don't need a meeting. I don't need an agenda. I just need somebody who, you know, you think there would be anybody in the community? And he said, you know, maybe my Sunday school class would. And I said, well, I can't ask for that, but I can just tell you I have that need. And I took a mom, and she talked, and from that Sunday school class has come every year an Easter egg hunt where they have 500 eggs, and all of our kids come, and the Easter bunny's there. Food, and that Sunday school class does that. The Breakfast with Santa is another Sunday school class at that church. Pizza and movies that a Sunday school class does, because Justin tells those folks that. So that's part of it, is just for them to know what you do, and then to find people in your community. Justin went to Kiwanis and said, I want Reconnecting Families to be your children and youth project last year. So what they did was they went to Mothers Making a Change, and Justin, not me, I didn't have anything to do with it, got money from Georgia Power, you know, got money from Cobb EMC, got money for them to go in and renovate, and nobody was happier than the staff. They had those televisions that weigh like 300 pounds, you know how we all now have those flat screens, and they would come into staffing and say, Justin says we're going to get flat screens. I mean, that's significant in their world. And so, but I will say this, when I told the ballet story, somebody said, when Patty said, well, you know, Juanita Steadman has touched me, the other person, Johnny Gabriel, who owns Gabriel, said, that's because Juanita Steadman has the longest arms of anybody I've ever seen. And that's part of that, your head racing. I mean, Bryn gets those emails, you know, I mean, the other day I was at the gym, and I never watch Ellen. I don't, but I think she's really funny. And so she's adopted this whole elementary school, and I'm thinking, you know, maybe Ellen could adopt our drug court. I mean, you know, you never know. And so I think, it's that head racing, and I have these folks, but that's it. And it's people knowing what you do. And what happens is this, we have a mom who speaks at Kiwanis, or we have Leadership Cobb, who is 40 of the county's professional business and government leaders. And then I'll be on the streets of the square and have the dad of one of those adults come up and say, oh my goodness, my daughter Debbie was there at your drug court and said, there but by the grace of God could be my family. And that's the thing that you have to, in some way, communicate with them. I think we have a market, and Bryn has been awesome handling that market, but you won't find a family that has not been touched by drug addiction. And it doesn't matter their socioeconomic level, it doesn't matter, I've had nurses, I've had teachers, I've had, people who can stand up and say, I had a house, 2 cars, I lost everything when I started using meth, and I have people who've lived on the streets. So I think that that's one thing, and I think the other thing that has to be done, very significantly done by Bryn and the people out talking for your court, is talk about money. That's what Governor Deal has done. He didn't just go in and say, I want $10 million. He went in and said, this is where that $10 million should come from, because we're going to save it in other places. So if you talk in numbers, especially if you're talking to business groups, but that means as a judge, I really, I guess I sound like an addict, I'll confess, I hate going to chamber meetings. I think they're horrendous to have to go to. They meet at 7:30 in the morning. I have other stuff to do. Oh yeah, I know now it's on television, great. They probably all know it, but you go and you establish those relationships. Bryn, anything about that?
Well, I know a couple of people have asked me a little bit, there may be a little bit of confusion about Reconnecting Families, but what Judge Steadman's saying is we're a completely separate charity. We're a 501c3, and so we get more because we're able to filter things. Instead of, obviously you can't accept donations and provide any tax information through the court, but going through a separate entity, which is Reconnecting Families, we are acting as a full charity. And we have no monies that overlap with the court system. We're completely private funded, privately donated, and that helps us. That means I can be the front person for getting those support funds, those support systems, by going out acting as a charity instead of as Judge Steadman's court.
And you, if they know the two, one supporting the other, it happens, but having that supports those courts, then they do that identification. And then you have volunteer board members who go out and talk about it. And, it's just, it's destiny or ddivine intervention or all kinds of things that happen. But like the Ed Bowles Honda, one of the things was this, actually she dates somebody who's in Leadership Cobb who she works for a moving company. And one of the huge things that was difficult for us was if we had furniture, somebody calls up and says, my mother's died, I've got a house full of furniture. Well, honestly, Mia knows, and Alicia and Diane, people at the court would look down at them because they thought, oh God, they know I have a truck and they're getting ready to send me to move. I'm talking about probation officers, that's not what they should be doing. And she's been amazing. When people move, this is a national moving company. And because she learned about it through Reconnecting Families, and she's now on the board, she said, if somebody's moving, if you have anything that you don't want to move, you're planning on getting rid of, we have a nonprofit that'll take that furniture and we'll pick it up and we'll store it, and that's huge for us. So you're very welcome. I could talk about that forever because I think it's so huge. Anybody else? Yes.
Your drug court moms have parent attorneys when they go into your program?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a dedicated parent attorney?
Yes, we have a parent attorney who sits on our board, Charlotte Evans. So yes, and thanks for mentioning that. Charlotte's not here. They have parent attorneys. They have guardian ad litem attorneys. So they have all of those things. They don't come in, and they actually, the documents that they sign, which give away a lot of their rights as far as what we can do and drug screening and stuff, they sit down with their attorney and make those decisions. Thank you for mentioning that. Judge Bobby, did you have a question?
I have about 100 questions. I thought it would be easy to write them down and send them to you, but I will ask this. Does your deprivation track and your drug court track run separately? Or do
No.
you?
No, they run together.
No, we do those. There's kind of two answers to that. If we need to have a hearing, these attorneys, our SAGs, will know to set that, or Sharonda will know to set that on a non-drug court day. But if we're talking about an extension, if we're talking about things that everybody kind of knows what's going on, we do it in drug court. And they have an attorney, and it's taken down.
So you remove some of that redundancy.
Right, yes.
Okay.
And the case has to transfer to me. Sometimes all of us as judges, and I'm the worst for doing this, you get some case that you just don't want to let go of. That usually means that I'm really ticked at that family. I know, Judge Spivey, you never do that, but it's like I am not letting them go to somebody else. They're going to have to look at me. I mean, these folks...
Well, I'm the only judge, so
That's true. Well,
they don't have any choice.
they have to look at you anyway. Well, some of mine are like, they come in and say, oh, God, it's Judge Steadman. One mom actually said to the deputies, don't even take me in there. There's not any need for me to go in there if that's who's on the bench, because they knew how mad I'd be. But the case has to be transferred to me. And if it goes to termination, I then transfer it, because that's the other flip of that. I do not think it's fair to these parents that I've had that long history with, and am probably pretty upset about the fact of all the services. I just think it's a much fairer process to transfer it. I've got one right now that I haven't transferred, but the mom's missing. So I've said to Sharonda knew. She sent me an email and said, shouldn't we transfer this case? It's gone to termination. And I said, well, why don't we wait and get the hearing and see whether or not mom shows up, because she's being served by publication. But yeah, I transfer it to another judge, and we've all just kind of done that.
And just with the permanency, the deprivation, it doesn't go away. I mean, when we get custody, it's usually for the 12 months. But however, with our guidelines, the Adoption Safe Family Act, it's like, if we're coming up on those 12 months and this parent hasn't done anything on their case plan, or, they're not at a point where, the kids can be unified, it's usually tracked for termination. But the good thing with the program is sometimes, I've had a mom who was in a program for about 18 months, but under the judge's supervision and other things, we were able to allow this mom to continue to have some more time to do what needed to be done so that she can have, everything in order for when the children were placed back in her custody. So.
And I probably don't behave any better than you do, Judge Spivey. I mean, my poor DFACS workers are like, oh, God, I've got to go in there and tell her that, we've got to do this hearing. And I'm like, oh. We're right in the middle of this, and it's the same thing with treatment. When they want to if they tell me they've got beds, I start literally looking for folks or thinking about folks. But the other is when they have to come in and say, Judge, their time's up. We've got, and that's something that your team has to do. If they've been in treatment as long as they can be, if we haven't been working on housing with them, we're failing them. We've got to be working. Where are they going to go? And that's the struggle with a lot of our moms. Yes, Sharon?
Just a quick question. Average time before graduation?
That's hard. I would say average time before graduation is probably 18 months. And then they're with us a year. After they graduate.
I think that's a key point to emphasize then.
Yeah. After they graduate, they have a year of where they still have surveillance. They still turn into Diane their meeting sheet. They still get seen. They come in once a month. Some of them, we have a mom who's a bus driver. She can't come in during drug court, so she sees Diane at least once a month. that is key, is to not say, we've given you everything, we're going to not throw you, but put you back out in the community. But they stay in that court a year after that without defects. But
Yeah,
Sharonda
and
is
let
still
me
their
say,
caseworker.
It makes my job easier because it's helpful that I know that this will be in place even after, you know, defects is not in the case, on the case anymore. And also, you know, we still have the advantages of, you know, if I hear about this mom and if I know, through our OFI office that does the Medicaid and food stamp, if we got a mom who was in the program and she's no longer receiving food stamps, or, you know, the Medicaid is turned off, that's something that I can say, hey, you know, this is an issue and maybe we need to address this with, you know, Alicia, who's now the therapist in that home, to prevent these kids from coming back into care. We can do that.
And DFACS has been amazing. What's Mary's last name? I think
Wells.
Mary Wells started just showing up at our staffing, and she's the food stamp benefit person. And she started saying, hey, Sharon, I think this is a drug court mom, and it looks like her food stamps are getting ready to be turned off, and I'm not sure why.
Right.
And one of the things that we deal with is treatment is in Douglas County. Residential can be in Douglas and in Cobb, so they're dealing with Douglas DFACS on those kinds of things. They may be in Shelter Plus in Douglas County, and it's just, you know, kind of always making sure that they've got what they need. And we don't always do that. I would like for each of these folks just to do a wrap up. I cannot tell you how very blessed I am to work with these amazing people each and every day. I mean, they blow me away each and every day. And I have, if you're a guardian in my courtroom, raise your hand. I got a slew in here. DFACS is here. My SAGs are here. And I don't think that, again, is isolated to Cobb County. I think that is isolated to the heart of it. And I'm fortunate because I have these folks who truly have the heart. I got Bryn, I mean, you know, because a friend of mine said, oh, my son's, you know, a guy he went to law school with has a friend who wants to work with children, and she was a pharmaceutical sales rep. I mean, I feel like, you know, heaven opened up and dropped Bryn in my courthouse. But it's because they truly are dedicated to it. And I think they need to kind of wrap up and say anything they want to say.
Yeah, I guess to that point, if you know, for those people that are interested in the nonprofit angle, the kind of area that I have, sort of along the lines, I was a corporate person. I was not at all county or government related, and all the acronyms still confuse me. But you know, I think it was helpful to have a different perspective. I see what the community sees, and I see when people may be confused, or it may be helpful for people to work with a charity because they can't understand the court systems. So I sort of act as that liaison that you know, kind of manages those two angles. But I've loved it. It's been one of the biggest blessings for me. So.
I can just say that it makes my job so much easier. I'm very thankful to have the relationship that I have with everyone on this case and on this panel, and just being knowledgeable about my moms and knowing what I can do to help them and to reunify, you know, these children with their parents, and especially just do what's in the best interest of that child. So it's very helpful for, you know, me as being a DFACS employee.
And I would just like to say that, you know, I'd just like to remind everybody that addiction is a chronic disease, just like diabetes or high blood pressure, and it can be successfully managed, but just like diabetes and high blood pressure, if you don't treat it, it becomes progressively worse and it'll end in death. And treatment is very cost effective. It's $20 a day to treat someone in outpatient, $45 to $50 a day to incarcerate someone, $3,000 a day to have a child in neonatal care. So treatment works and it is effective.
I think one of the important goals that we have set is communication and teamwork. We all work very well together. We all have great communication. We can all pick up the telephone. We can send an email. We'll get an answer of any questions. We kind of rely on each other, lean on each other, work together. And of course, we all communicate with Judge Steadman.
I just think any community can do one of these courts. Every community has passionate people. The one thing I will say is we are very blessed. We have a very passionate group of people, and you have to have that. It does become 24/7. There are times where you're like, why do I keep looking at my phone? But when things come up, you know, when you have women in your lives for 2 to 3 years, they kind of become part of your family. And if they have an emergency, you definitely want to jump in there and try and do what you can for them. But we're very blessed to have these courts.
Just on the treatment end, again, just Steadman touched on this earlier as far as like the expectations and of the moms, et cetera. But it's just kind of understanding. Sometimes like I get so bogged down of what I feel like needs to be done that I just need to stop and listen to what is it that you really need. And I just think that's an important piece to take with this is as you're starting your court, listen to the families. 9 times out of 10, or often 10 times out of 10, I guess I would say, is that they've never had anyone just to sit and listen. I mean, that component alone is enough for them to get the self-confidence back to just get started. And so that's just something I would put out there when you're starting your courts, is just stop and listen to them. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome to come visit us. My email is jsteadman, no A, it's like Oprah's boyfriend. I always tell people, STEDMAN @cobbcounty.org. And I think Bryn you can get through Reconnecting Families, but you'll see that. But if you send something to me and you may need to talk to one of these people, I'm going to flip it to them. Would love to have you come visit, but thank you very much for allowing us to speak.